doing a full review on the new palettes from Becca. So there's a new collection from Becca. I don't have the entire collection, but they collaborated with Khloe and Malika to kind of create their own little collection, which I thought was super pretty. I always love face palettes. There's a lot of people out there that don't love face palettes, but I absolutely love my Becca and Chrissy Teigen palette. Let me say this, I know it's Friday, and I know that I always review a foundation on Friday, but I am waiting on my Dior foundation to come. The new foundation from Dior, it's the Dior Forever Skin Glow Radiant Perfection Foundation, launched on Nordstrom's.com. I was able to pick me up a bottle, praying that I got the right shade. I was supposed to be here Saturday, but I just got an update that it'll actually be here on Friday, today, when you guys are seeing this. So my plan is I am going to wear it Friday, Saturday, and then upload the video on Sunday. So that is the reason why you guys are not seeing a foundation video today. I'm very sorry about that, but I know that so many of you are waiting for me to give you guys my opinion on this. This is supposed to be like a radiant glow foundation. I'm so excited about it. So I decided to go ahead and pop this one up today because I know that some of you guys are probably waiting to hear my opinion on these. And then on Sunday, I will give you guys my full opinion on that Dior foundation, which I'm pretty excited about. So when I originally seen this collection, I was actually going to buy a palette and 2 lippies. But then when I started looking at the 2 palettes, I struggled deciding which palette I was going to buy. And I kept looking at them, and I kept kind of reading all the descriptions about them. And I'm a medium skin tone, and I know that Khloe's palette was designed for light to medium skin tones, and then Malika was designed for like medium tan to like dark skin tones. You guys are like me, sometimes the light to medium isn't dark enough for my skin. But then you've got the other side of it where if you buy the medium to tan to deeper, it's too dark and it's too pigmented. So I decided that there's probably a lot of you out there who are medium skin tone like I am. Maybe you were trying to decide between the 2 palettes just like I was, and I thought, well, maybe I'll buy the 2 palettes, forget the lippies, I have enough lippies in my collection, forget the lippies, and let's just buy the 2 palettes and compare them next to each other. Last month, I uploaded a video of me comparing the 2 holiday palettes from Hourglass, and in that video, I compared the actual shades next to each shade. So instead of doing one palette on one arm and the other palette on the other arm, I decided to actually compare the shades next to each other. I'm going to create this video the exact same way. So I'm actually going to compare the highlighter shades from each palette next to each other, the 2 blush shades from each palette next to each other, and then the bronzer next to each other, just so that you guys can see the differences between the actual shades of those blush, bronzers, and highlighters versus having it all, you know, having each palette on one arm. It's just easier to really know what those shades look like, especially if they're compared next to each other. Let's discuss the Khloe palette first. This is what it looks like. It's very, very beautiful. It's kind of got this gold shade. The only thing I don't like about it, again, is the fingerprints. I had the exact same issue with the Hourglass palettes. I don't like fingerprints. I just don't like them. But this palette is very, very beautiful, and I think that they did a great job with the entire presentation of it. It has this little heart right here, which is really, really pretty. And then when you open it up, you have a nice size mirror, and then this is what the actual shades look like in the Khloe palette. I have the Malika on this side, and I have this Khloe palette on this side. I would say that this is definitely more of that like peachy champagne type palette. So let me give you guys some descriptions of the shades in this palette. So the bronzer, which is this shade right here, it is described as a neutral medium tan with a smooth satin matte finish, sheer buildable formula. And I will say it is a buildable formula. So when I went in, I was able to kind of go in a few times and kind of build it to the shade I wanted, versus just being an explosion of pigmentation and then you have to try to blend it out on the skin. So I did like how this bronzer is buildable. Then you have the Soft Focus Highlighter, which is the first shade in the palette. It is a warm, creamy vanilla that creates a smooth, soft focus natural glow on the skin. The Radiant Blush in Fierce, which is this shade right here, it is described as a warm peach that adds a flush of color and a pop of glow. It does have more of a highlight effect, so it is pretty shimmery as far as that goes. It does have a little bit more of a highlighter effect. This shade down here is the Radiant Blush in Fabulosity. It is a cool tone that adds a flush of color and a pop of glow. Now I will say, I would say that it's not as glowy as this one up here, but it's still shimmery. So, you know, I kind of speak about this later on in the video, but if you have any type of texture on your cheeks, whether you have enlarged pores or whatever, I don't know that you're gonna wanna use these blush shades because they are pretty highlighty. They do highlight the skin. I actually think it looks beautiful on my skin. It looks beautiful on my pores. They're getting more and more enlarged as I get older, but that's not my issue. My issue is my texture down in here. I do have this spot right here. As you can see, you know, anytime you put highlighter on it, it will just kind of come out to play. But it's not as bad as it could be. But this is what the Khloe palette looks like. It's very beautiful, and it's kind of in more of a gold packaging. This is what the Malika palette looks like. So the Malika is more of a silvery type palette, so it has more of the silver, and then these shades are definitely deeper, and as you can see, I am wearing it on my eyes. You can see I'm definitely very bronzy, and even I put some bronzer up here, as you can tell. This palette is just definitely more pigmented and has deeper tones. So the bronzer, the Satin Matte Bronzer, is a warm tan with a smooth satin matte finish, sheared to buildable formula. Now, like I said later on in the video, if you have deeper skin tone, I don't know that this is going to show up on you. This is pretty pigmented, but it's not as dark as I would think some people would need their bronzer to be. It depends on how deep you are, but it's not a crazy dark formula. So I definitely think that this one would also be buildable on deeper skin tones. Both of the bronzers definitely feel buildable, and I do think that that is a true statement. So the highlighter, which is up here in the corner, is a peachy pink that creates a smooth, soft focus, natural glow on the skin, and it definitely has more of a pinky peach undertone to it. It definitely, in my opinion, on my skin tone, it goes more pink than peach. That one definitely has more of a pinky undertone in the highlighter. This one right here is called Yes Girl. It is a warm, vibrant coral that adds a flush of color and a pop of glow, and it really does. It is more of a corally shade, but I will say it's kind of reddish. It has a reddish undertone to it. So if you have deeper skin tones and you like that reddish undertone, I think you'll really love that blush. It's very, very beautiful on the skin. This one right here is called Make Me Blush. It is described as a golden rose that adds a flush of color and a pop of glow. Again, both of these blush shades in this palette are very highlighty. So if you have that type of texture or very enlarged pores, this definitely might not be a palette that you will want to pick up. So that's the description on these. Each palette is $44. Now, while I was at Ulta, because I knew I wasn't going to be buying the lippies, I went ahead and swatched them for you. I'm going to insert the clip right here. So that is what the actual shades look like in the lipstick, and that was in a flash. So I think they're very, very beautiful shades, and I just have a lot of lippies, and I really wanted to focus this video on these face palettes, but I do think that the shades are very, very pretty, and they felt very creamy. Each lipstick was $24, and I think that's pretty much the typical price for Becca's lipstick. Now, they also came out with these glow letters, and these are $18, and I didn't pick these up. I was able to take a picture of that swatched on my hand, just so that you guys could see what it looks like up close. I don't really like stuff like that. That stuff doesn't really do a whole lot for me. I think they're pretty, and they kind of seem like they would give you more of a bronzy look. You could highlight your collarbone, your chest, whatever. If you do like that bronzy type look, maybe to do the perimeter of the face or something. Let's jump right into this video, and I'm going to show you guys how I played with these palettes. Like I said, on this side of the face is the Khloe palette, and on this side of the face is the Malika palette. We're going to compare them next to each other. I'm going to swatch them for you later on in the video, and yeah, that's what we're doing. So without further ado, let's jump right into the video. The silver one is Malika's, the gold one is Khloe's. I did not buy the Be a Light palette from Becca. I wanted to get that palette, but I heard so many people didn't like that palette, so I decided not to get it. But when I seen this, I was like, wow, these shades are really, really pretty. So this is what Khloe's looks like up close, just so that you guys can see that. Very, very pretty. And then this is what Malika's looks like, just so that you guys can see. And then let's put them together. So this is what they look like next to each other. This palette is probably for medium skin and darker. And then maybe Khloe's palette is for lighter skin to medium skin. And that's kind of why I feel like medium skin could wear both of these palettes. That's the reason why I wanted to compare them next to each other, just so that I can give you guys my opinion on, you know, which one I like best based on medium skin tone. The only thing that I have on right now is my foundation, my concealer. My brows are done. I did do a tiny bit of contouring, like just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. I used my KKW Beauty contour stick and just sharpened this line just a little bit. So I have two bronzer brushes. I mean, these are like powder brushes, but you can use them as bronzer brushes. And I'm gonna go into the bronzer from the Khloe palette, which is the gold palette. Just kind of start maybe carving out my cheeks a little bit with that shade. What I like about this so far is that it's not overly pigmented where you can kind of build it, but it's actually a really, really pretty shade of a bronzer. I like that. That's really pretty. Let's take the other brush and let's go into the one in the Malika palette, which is the silver palette. Okay, so right away you can tell that this one is definitely darker. It's richer in shade. As far as the shade goes, I feel like the one from the Khloe palette looks better on my skin tone. This one definitely has a little bit of like a rosy undertone to the bronzer. I think in the Malika palette, the silver palette, I am actually gonna go into this shade right up here on the top. I have two blush brushes, by the way. So I'm gonna go into that and apply that right. Okay, now that's a pretty shade, and I do feel like, that is definitely a deeper shade, but it's really, really pretty. It's a pretty shade. I have a zit that's healing right here, and it hurts like a bugger. I was testing out a foundation last week, and it broke me out so bad. I think I'm gonna use this shade right here from the Khloe palette, the gold palette, and I'm gonna place that right here on this side. Okay, so again, in my opinion, the Khloe palette looks prettier against my skin tone. I do think that you know, somebody with medium skin tone could wear both of these palettes, but I think the Khloe palette complements the medium skin tone much more than the Malika palette. Let's move on to the highlighter. Let's go into the one from Khloe, the gold palette, and I'm gonna go into the highlighter right up here. Yeah, that's pretty. Ooh, that's pretty highlighter. Holy smokes. That is a beautiful highlighter. Oh, you know, I'm not surprised though, because Becca always has such beautiful highlighters. Let's go into the one in the Malika palette. This shade right here, that's pretty too. It's got a rosy undertone. So it's a beautiful highlighter. But again, for my skin tone, I like the highlighter better on this side. I'm going to continue to keep the whole momentum going. I am going to use the Malika palette on one eye and the Khloe palette on the other. So I'm going to start with the Khloe palette, the gold palette. And I'm going to go into the highlighter and kind of place this kind of just all over. Like, I just want this to kind of be like the undertone of everything, just because this palette kind of does give me that like whole glowy vibes. I'm going to go into the bronzer, and I'm just going to start building this in the crease and see just how much pigmentation we can get. And if I have to dig very hard to get it, you know, sometimes you got to dig to get pigmentation from your bronzers. So I'm just going to keep digging and going in. So this is the third dip to try to get that depth, but I am starting to get some color payoff. I mean, I'm starting to get somewhere, but I've had to go in it like 5 or 6 times. I'm going to switch gears and I'm going to go over to the Malika palette, and let's go on this side just so that you guys can see the differences between what the highlighter looks like and, you know, what the bronzer looks like on the eyes before I go in with the color. So this is what the highlighter is looking like. And I'm going to go into the bronzer and just start building that up in the crease. Now that bronzer is giving me much more payoff much quicker because it's a darker bronzer, which obviously makes sense. So I'm able to kind of build it up quicker, but right away I'm noticing that bronzer has that little bit of that pinky red undertone. So just know that. You know, it's always nice to see if you can use these as eyeshadow. So I'm going to first go into the Khloe palette, the gold palette. So I'm basically using the blush that I didn't use on my face right here on my eyes. And let me just say, holy shitskis, that's a pretty shade. I'm going to wipe that brush off and I'm going to go into this shade right here in the Malika palette. And I'm going to place that on my lid. I didn't show you. I used this shade right here from the Khloe palette on this eye. I didn't show you, I'm sorry. So I'm going to place that. It has that rosy shade to it. So as you can see, this side is peachy and this is more of the reddish pinky undertone. Very, very pretty though. Holy smokes, that's pretty. I went ahead and threw on some lashes. On my lips, I put on my KKW Beauty Nude number 2 lip liner. And I used this shade right here in the Khloe palette. And I just kind of took a lip brush like this and I just went in and just kind of put it on like that. So I think it looks really pretty. I am going to show you the differences between the two highlighters next to each other, the blushes next to each other, and the bronzers next to each other. On this arm right here is the top row, okay? So this is the highlighter from the Khloe palette, the gold palette. This is the highlighter from the Malika palette, the silver palette. This is the blush from the Khloe palette. This is the blush from the Malika palette on the top row. So those two blush shades are from the top row of the palette. The one from the Khloe palette, the highlighter, has more of that champagne shade. And then the highlighter from the Malika palette has more of a peachy, rosy undertone for a highlighter. The only thing that's kind of throwing me off is that these two shades look very, very similar. This is actually the blush shade from the Khloe palette. So it is actually this shade right here. So the highlighter from the Malika palette, the very first shade in the palette, looks very similar to the blush shade from the Khloe palette. But this is the shade, first blush shade right here in the Malika palette, and it does kind of have a very rosy peach undertone. Everything that I've noticed from this palette, the Malika palette, everything has a pink rosy undertone. And then on this arm right here is the blushes on the bottom row and the bronzer. This is the blush from the Khloe palette. This one right here, this one right here. It's kind of hard to do that. And then this is the bottom row, the first blush on the Malika palette. So you can see the differences. Again, the Malika palette has that pink rosy undertone to it. And everything from the Khloe palette has more of a peach champagne undertone. So the bronzers are definitely like kind of the same texture. They feel the same and apply the very same. They're just different in shade. This is the bronzer from the Khloe palette. This is the bronzer from the Malika palette. They feel the same, they swatch the same, they do have that satin texture, but the only difference is, you know, the one from the Malika palette is just darker. That's it. So here are the swatches next to each other, just so that you guys can compare those shades. So again, these two right here are from the Khloe palette. These two right here are from the Malika palette. These two right here are from the Khloe palette. And these two right here are from the Malika palette. So I just wanted to show you guys what those look like next to each other so that you can have a better idea what these, you know, what these shades are and how they look on the skin. Let me give you guys my opinion on these two palettes. So let's discuss the Khloe palette first. Personally, I feel like the Khloe palette looks better on my skin tone. I do think that if you're darker than I am, I don't know that this palette would work for you. This palette is for that person that likes a more champagne shade of a highlighter and likes a peachy undertone for a blush. So of course I love peach, and peach definitely looks the best on my skin tone. So personally, I feel like this one is definitely made for my skin tone. If you're lighter than I am, I totally think these shades would be beautiful on your skin. There's a lot of you guys out there that didn't get this palette. This is the Hourglass Ambient Lighting Edit palette. Here are some swatches comparing the Khloe palette to this Hourglass palette, the gold palette that's no longer available. So right down here, this is the bronzer from the Hourglass palette. This is the bronzer from the Khloe palette. This is the blush shade in the Hourglass palette. This is the first blush shade in the Khloe palette. And there are some similarities just as far as the tones, but I wouldn't say there's similarities in the shades as far as that goes. But there's some similarities there, and I think if maybe you missed out on getting this palette, this Khloe palette might be a nice alternative. I mean, obviously it's not exact, but it's a nice alternative. If you have a lot of texture on your skin, these are very shimmery as far as blush shades go. If you have an issue with enlarged pores, I would probably stay away from these palettes. If you have a lot of texture on your cheeks, I would probably stay away from these palettes because these are all very, very shimmery. This palette is definitely geared for deeper skin tones. This was for deeper skin tones. The bronzer price should have been a little bit darker, in my opinion. I haven't watched anybody's reviews that has deeper skin tones, but I am curious to see how they feel about this bronzer because I kind of feel like, I don't know that this bronzer would work on all dark skin tones. You know what I'm saying? So I guess depending on how dark you are, this bronzer may or may not work for you. But both of these blush shades are very rosy and very shimmery and very beautiful on the skin, but I do think that they are for that person who has a deeper skin tone. However, I do think that if you are my skin tone, you can totally make this palette work if you like that rosy type undertone. It just depends on what you prefer. I would go through your blush shades and I would look at your highlighters and I would say, okay, you know, what are my favorite blush shades and what are my favorite highlighter shades? And if you like that rosy base, then you will love this palette from Malika. If you like that more champagne for a highlighter and you like more of a peachy undertone in a blush, then the Khloe palette is definitely your best friend. I hope this video helped you guys to decide which palette would be best for you. I hope this video was helpful for you guys. Thank you guys so much for your patience. My Foundation Friday video will be up ASAP. I am so excited for that foundation to come. So be on the look for that in the next couple of days. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you guys again for all the love that you guys show me in my channel. It truly means the world to me. And I hope you guys have a fantastic day filled with love, happiness, and joy. I will see you all tomorrow, and I love you all so much. Bye.